Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. It's part 2 of the September Q&A. We've already addressed half of the questions that you guys asked us on the YouTube channel yesterday. So if you missed out on those, go back, check out some of the really cool and interesting questions that you guys have asked us. And we've got plenty more for today, so let's get to them.
I'm going to hand this one over to Tim. You can answer one.
All right,
this
sure.
is a good Tim question. How competitive do you think the GPU market will be next year, now with 3 teams playing? Go on, Tim. Get your crystal ball out.
Yeah, I'll look into the future. I'm saying that the market will be pretty competitive.
Pretty competitive.
Yeah, pretty competitive. 3 players, Intel in there.
Intel's not going to be absolute garbage out of the gate.
They probably will because it'll be their first architecture. But, I mean, it all depends on the pricing, because Intel could come out with a chip that doesn't perform super well, but it could be priced really well.
I was just joking. Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm excited to test it all out and see.
Yeah, I mean, you get 3 companies, and AMD's coming back. I think, future looks pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, Steve. Could I use liquid food coloring as a cheap dye alternative for open loops? Would there be any long-term problems such as corrosion or clogging issues?
Well, this would be a good question for my close friend Jay from Jay's 2 Cents. He'd probably know a bit about this. But in absence of Jay's presence, I wouldn't recommend it. Just on a hunch, I'd say it's probably not a good idea. We know that the chemistry and the liquids and stuff, it's all quite sensitive. So people get clogging issues quite easily. So I'd say there's a good chance that's probably a problem. I'm not a food dye expert. I don't really know what's involved there, but I'd say you'd probably see some sort of growth perhaps. I think probably the bigger issue would be is it'd stain, because those bottles get pretty well stained, don't they? I'm not
a chemist, so I don't know how this works.
Well, the other thing I would say, I'm almost certain of this, is that it would fade quite quickly.
Yep.
Especially if actual UV light was hitting it and stuff like that. I think it would. Yeah, I just don't think it's worth doing. You can actually buy proper dyes that are designed to work with certain coolants, or distilled water. So I'd probably look into that. But yeah, you'd possibly get a better answer from people who do a lot of this sort of stuff.
All right, got some monitor questions coming up, so Steve's going to have a fun time here.
I'm just going to get comfortable and listen with the rest of the people here. All right. I got nothing to add.
Tim, you often talk about a monitor's performance after full calibration, but I haven't seen any recommendations on what a professional should use to perform one. Is spending $3,800 on the SpectraCal C6 and Calman Ultimate necessary to achieve maximum performance, or will something like a Spider X Pro and DisplayCal suffice? You say, what should a professional use? So I guess I'll answer this in 2 ways. If you're just an enthusiast at home, you're doing a bit of content creation or Photoshop work, then really what you say with a Spider X Pro and DisplayCal will be perfectly fine. You'll get very good results. Those entry-level colorimeters like the Spider series, pretty good. So certainly, these things cost a few $100s. You're not going to get something that's really bad. So generally speaking, if you're that sort of calibrator, that sort of hardware should be fine. If you're a professional though, and you're sort of going around and either charging money for your services or thinking of calibrating for movie studios or people that really need things to look 100% accurate and be really, really high quality, I would go higher end than the SpectraCal C6. You'll need both. So the SpectraCal C6 is a colorimeter. You'll need that for your brightness and sort of contrast level testing, but you'll also want a spectrophotometer, which is an even higher end instrument, to really accurately measure the colors, and those can be quite expensive. And then Calman Ultimate obviously does all your calibration, does a lot more than DisplayCal can do, but a lot of the features that Calman has that DisplayCal doesn't have are more for professionals. So I tend to think that DisplayCal's fine for most sort of everyday Joes. But if you're a professional, probably go get some professional advice and don't just ask me as a random YouTuber.
Actually, there's another one, isn't there?
There's another one. So Steve's
Lucky
still
this chair's
relaxing.
Comfortable.
Tim, your monitor reviews are top tier, the best on YouTube. Well, thanks for that. I think your recent testing and reporting improvements helped ensure this. Do you have any other changes or upgrades to your monitor reviews that you were thinking of doing? Keep up the great work. Thanks for all the excellent content. Yeah, thanks. We're always looking to improve everything, not just for monitors, but all sorts of things. I do want to, as more monitors introduce HDR technology, you might have seen that my testing tools are currently at the limits of what can be done for HDR, so I will need to spend about $6,000 or $7,000 on a high-end tool to do it, but that's down the track at some point.
Sign up to our Patreon account.
Sign up to the Patreon account, but that will do the next generation of HDR testing, and sort of, there's not too many monitors that really require that sort of tool at the moment, but as more and more, exist, we've got to improve our testing to that sort of level. And then, there's things we haven't tested super in depth, like black frame insertion or the strobing modes that a lot of people like to use. We'd never really have touched on that, so I might look into seeing how to test that in a really in-depth way. But yeah, we're always looking to improve everything around here. We never want to stop and just be content. Gotta keep pushing.
That's it.
All right, Steve, we're done with the monitor questions. So there's a question for you here.
I made it.
But you might need to get your crystal ball out. Will the 3950X be a better gaming CPU than the 9900KS?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think that'll require a crystal ball, given what we already have available. Yeah, I don't think so. A better gaming CPU. It's like they're going to be so fast and so kind of overkill for gaming. Again, it's like, unless you're gaming at a super low resolution with a super powerful graphics card, there's going to be really no difference between the two. And even at a reasonable resolution like RTX 2080 Ti, 1440p, high to ultra quality settings, there's no way you'll be able to, like, if you did a blind test, you'd never be able to pick which one was which. They're both going to be that fast. And then it comes down to so that's answering that question. That question's answered. I suppose if you're to sort of answer it as which is going to be the best CPU, that'll come down to price. But I don't know how expensive the 9900KS will be. But you're getting, twice as many cores with the 3950X. So it's kind of chalk and cheese comparison. All right, I've got a question here that I picked out. I don't recall how upvoted it was, but it was something that really interested me. And I've been wondering the exact same thing. So I'm going to make Tim address it. There's no getting out of this one, Tim. Not that he's got out of any other ones, but whatever. I keep seeing videos, he says, notably from Digital Foundry and Timmy Joe, about how amazing CRTs are supposed to be for gaming, and is keen to know if Tim the Monitor King agrees. And I am keen to know if Tim the Monitor King agrees.
So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to CRTs versus LCDs. One of the reasons that a lot of people think they're so good for gaming is just the way that a CRT works. An LCD holds the frame that you're currently showing for the entire period, so basically the frame's always there. Whereas a CRT, the way that, the photon cannon or whatever it's called, the electron cannon or something like that. It's got a cool name.
Photon cannon, that's
photon
what it
cannon,
is.
Something like that. I think it's an electron cannon. Anyway, basically it paints across the screen and only shows you the various portions of the frame for a very short period of time. So if you've ever seen a video or a slow motion video of a CRT, you'll notice how it sort of, there's a line that goes down, it flickers across, and you get that flickering effect. The reason why that's so good for gaming is that, say you're trying to track a moving object on the screen. If your eyes are only seeing flashes of an enemy moving across the screen, your eyes will fill in the rest, and it will appear that that moving object is really crisp and clear, even if your frame rate isn't super high. Whereas with an LCD, because the frame is basically always shown, as you're trying to track something across the frame, when your eyes are moving and something is not moving on the screen, you get a bit of blur. And that blur is literally introduced by your eyes in motion.
Okay.
So that's why an LCD can look a bit more blurry than a CRT. And one of the reasons why you can use a 60 hertz or 85 hertz CRT and it seems really responsive and really clear. Another reason is that they have almost no input latency. They also have almost no response time. So the response times are just almost instantaneous on a CRT. All of those things really help for gaming to give a fluid experience. But I don't agree that CRTs are the best currently for gaming, simply because there's a lot of cons to a CRT. They're massive and heavy. For someone that is young like me and still has decent high frequency hearing, they are noisy. You only have limited resolutions because they stopped making them well before current monitors exist. So yeah, you can run a monitor like a really high-end 1440 or 1600p CRT at a non-native resolution. Looks great, but it's not a 4K image. So if you're really into your 4K gaming or ultra-wide gaming, there's no ultra-wide CRTs. So these are all things that sort of go against CRTs. HDR is non-existent on a CRT panel. So there's lots of different things you have to weigh up when you talk about these technologies. And if you have a really high refresh rate, like 240 hertz or 144 hertz TN panel, it's going to get pretty close to a CRT in terms of motion. And on top of that, if you add in those black frame insertion modes on a panel that does that technology well, you'll also get some of the advantages that a CRT has.
Okay.
So I think the way monitors are going, people are sort of trying to get to the best of all the worlds in terms of making a panel that does everything really well. And obviously CRT has its advantages, but I think modern LCDs are getting pretty close. So I think for most people, I wouldn't be going back and buying an old CRT and expecting an awesome experience. Some things will be good, some things will be bad, but it's kind of just all sorts of technologies.
Yeah, I think people are latching on too much to the no input lag or the reduced low,
and
all that
really
stuff
good monitors have no input lag currently.
Yeah, so if you take any old technology or any other technology and only focus on what it does really well and ignore the drawbacks, then you're presented as being something amazing that we should have never ever abandoned. I think that's...
Yeah, and I think it depends as well what level of monitor you're comparing it to. If you're getting a mid-range, like say a 1080p VA monitor at 144 hertz, like, it's okay, it's going to be a good monitor, but it's not going to be as fast as a high-end CRT from 10 years ago. But that's only because you're comparing to a mid-tier monitor.
Yeah,
if you get the best of what LCD can do, I think it will quite easily challenge and beat a CRT in most areas.
I think Digital Foundry, which is one of the examples given here, was saying that the CRT that they were using was better than like any OLED display.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree on OLED. I mean, OLED has no input lag and well, it depends on the monitor about the input lag, but certainly response times are in the 0.1 millisecond range for an OLED.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, they still have some of the issues. OLEDs are still a frame and hold display. They don't operate like a CRT with scanning. But there are some technologies to get OLEDs working like that.
Okay.
As well. They can have black frame insertion. They can have scanning. So yeah, it just depends. And it depends on what you want out of a monitor.
Yeah.
You can't just say a CRT is better for everyone, because if you don't have enough room and you want something bigger than 24 inches or so, then,
Well, I used to have a big, expensive CRT. Yeah. I'm glad I have a 32-inch.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going back.
Yeah, so...
All right, this is sort of an interesting question. I picked this one out from sort of lower down in the rankings, but I wanted to address it. Basically, they're asking, why don't we criticize expensive or how expensive X570 motherboards are? They start close to $200, so what's the deal with that? I see this a lot, especially in my top 5 video when I called the $200 X570 boards entry level. Mm-hmm. And people were confused by that, saying like that's not an entry-level motherboard, but it's an entry-level X570 board. I didn't say it was an entry-level AM4 motherboard. So the X570 chipset is meant to be the flagship chipset for that platform. It's the greatest you can get for the AM4 socket. It's better than X470 because it has PCIe 4.0. It's got some drawbacks, but basically you're paying for that PCIe 4.0 support. So you're buying a high-end motherboard. It's like when you buy a Z390 motherboard, it's more expensive than the H series or whatever. So yeah, I mean, the prices are a bit high. They're a bit excessive. It feels like, because we're used to AMD motherboards being quite competitively priced. But if you want an affordable AM4 motherboard that supports 3rd gen Ryzen processors, you've got B350, B450, X370, X470, and so on. So the X570 is just meant to be the tier above all of that. So here's another one. Where are the GTX 1650 low profile cards? That's the only plus side this card will have. And yeah, it's a really good question. Not sure where they are. I did see there was not sure if MSI was one of them.
There's some at Computex, weren't there? Yeah.
Zotac, I think we went and visited.
Zotac had one.
So they do exist, unfortunately. I have seen them for sale, but they were like $200-ish US, which is absurd.
All right.
I quickly jumped online and found some low-profile 1050 Ti's for $180 US, which is just, an absolute joke. A 1050 Ti is such a ridiculously slow graphics card these days. I mean, you can play games like Fortnite and stuff at 1080p with reasonable performance, but paying nearly $200 US when you can get like basically that's, what is that, like 1660 money almost?
Yep.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, well, an RX 570 is much cheaper. They're like 130 or something now.
RX 580 money easy.
It's kind of funny this, because I'll try not to ramble on for too long with this one. But as you guys know, I reviewed the 1650 when it was first launched, and I said in the title, pointless GPU. I think Gamers Nexus did the exact same thing, so they probably copped a bit of the sort of flack that I did. But people were arguing, saying, but it's a really efficient GPU. You can use it in, OEM systems and stuff, small form factor PCs where you can't fit a normal size graphics card. I'm like, but hang on a minute. We, along with everyone else, Gamers Nexus, every other media outlet you can name, were sent full size 1650 Ti graphics cards. And it's worse than that. They all required external PCIe power via a single 6-pin connector. So how else are we meant to review these things? I can't review it as a low profile card if that's the point of this low power GPU. You have to compare it to other full-size graphics cards with a 6-pin connector, which is exactly what we and everyone else did. And I think we called it right. Like, it's paying around $200 for a 1650 is madness. There's going to be so few situations where that makes sense.
It's a very niche product.
So
if you're in that niche, then sure.
It's extremely niche. Yeah. Extremely, because you have to have a really, really expensive small form factor PC to justify that.
Otherwise you just buy the budget
PC,
some $50 thing if you can get one.
Yeah, and put it just doesn't make sense. But anyway, I don't know where the low profile cards are. Really, for us to have reviewed the GTX 1650 and given it a positive review, which is definitely possible, we would have had to have a low profile card that was available at the MSRP. Then we would have probably given it a rave review. Certainly a much more positive review than we did. Because, it's pointless as a full-size card, and it's extremely pointless when it requires external PCIe power. Let's talk about an old system that you could put a graphics card in. What's your thoughts on 4th Gen i7 processors? Are they still relevant for daily usage? Yeah, well, that's a quad-core with hyper-threading, 4 threads, pretty capable CPU, the Haswell series, even today. So, the only problem there is, can you get them cheap? Which you really can't, but if you can get one for, a good price relative to a second-hand AM4 platform, then I think it's worth doing. Otherwise, it's worth paying a little, in my opinion, it's worth paying a little bit more for like a B350 board with like a Ryzen 5 1500X or something, or a Ryzen 5 1600. That'd be worth paying a small premium for, because you don't have to throw the thing in the bin when you can't use it anymore.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, those sort of quad-core CPUs from a few generations ago are reaching pretty close to their limits in terms of their lifetime, especially as we're starting to see more and more games get a bit choked up by the old quad cores.
From the modern games kill quad cores, but this is a quad core with hyper-threading, which gives it a bit more breathing room. But what you're saying is, true.
Yeah, you have to wonder, does it have 1 or 2 years left? Are you better off going with, as you say, a very cheap AM4 option? Yeah, it just depends. Yep.
Yeah, we've seen with a cheap B350 board, you can chuck a 3900X on that, which is why we rave about it. We're not fanboying AMD. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
So
it's a good solution.
Yep.
All right, Steve, why do motherboard vendors send pre-release hardware with CPU press kits? It causes issues like recently with some YouTubers claiming AMD is causing problems for their systems.
Well, it's not something we often see. It's quite rare that we do see this sort of thing. But the reason that MSI, I assume you're talking about the Godlike motherboard, the reason why they sent a pre-production board was just due to time. It was pretty much the board from Computex.
Yep.
So they wanted to be included. It's obviously all the reviewers featuring the Godlike motherboard and what's probably going to be their biggest content piece for the year. Kind of important to get included in that. We didn't actually use the MSI board for testing. Like Steve from Gamers Nexus, we determined that the Gigabyte board was the most stable, performed the most reliably and all that, so we ended up using that board. We felt like that was the most polished and refined at that point in time. But it's time. They just rushed it out. They wanted to be included. And really, I don't see too much of a problem with it if they're going to say this is a preview of what we have to offer. It's not ideal, but I think if it's made clear, then there's not a problem with that. And it wasn't really made clear. There's a couple of things. So firstly, performance-wise, unchanged. So from the pre-production board that the reviewers used to the retail board, you will see a 0 FPS difference in games, no difference in Cinebench. It's performing as expected. The problem is it's not quite as stable as the retail board, which is where Jay ran into his stability issues. I think. I don't even really want to touch on that one. It's possible Jay will get a retail board, do the same thing, and have the same problem. So until Jay does that and clears that up, I'm just going to leave that alone, I think. But yeah, that was... Anything else to add to that one, really?
No, not really.
Covered
it well.
Don't really want to say too much more on that subject. But I think if I'll say anything, I think this one's mostly on MSI. I feel like MSI should have done a better job of informing reviewers. I didn't really find out until after I'd done my VRM thermal testing.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't happen too often. It's not like all the hardware we get is pre-released.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
It's very rare. Most of the time, we spend quite a lot of money on hardware. Most of the time, I've bought a heap of Ryzen processors. I've bought quite a few X570 motherboards, and there's no difference between the boards we were given.
All right, that's it for part 2 of our monthly Q&A. We've just answered all of you guys' questions from the YouTube community tab. Always
Not all
appreciate
of them.
Well, to be fair, not all of them.
A lot of the ones that were upvoted.
All the ones that we flagged that we should answer for this month's Q&A. As always, thanks for you guys for posting questions there. We always appreciate all the support that you guys give us. But there is one more part that will be going up tomorrow on the channel that is addressing our Patreon questions. And if you're not already a Patreon member, perfect time to sign up, get your questions in for next month's Q&A, and just join all the fun in our Discord community. It's pretty great over there. What else should people do? Like the video?
Yep, like the video.
Thumbs up button.
We have merch now.
Yeah,
so
store.hardwareunboxed.com.
you can check that out. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
And just thanks for watching.
Yep, sounds good. All right.
Tim, Steve, we'll see you again next time.